Hi everyone, this is Charles Kwiatkowski again. Let's continue our discussion on Access Chapter 2. So we'll look at the book, and we'll see that the second part of Chapter 2, scrolling past what we covered in Part 1, second part covers data integrity and data validation. Okay, so let me open up just a regular Access database. All right, and that one just has one table. Let me try another one here. That one just has one table. One more. Okay. Here we have two tables, and you might have remembered before I mentioned that sometimes a field in one table is a field in another table. Therefore, we can tie those two tables together. Well, notice that here in the listings table for real estate listings, there's an agents field, and then there's an agents table. Well, we want to make sure that if that in that listing, that agent is in the agents field, we could use data integrity, okay, making sure that that value exists. We can also use a range of values, okay? For example, if we want a user to pick a value from 1 to 10, or true or false, red, green, or blue. Uh, Consistency, making sure it's consistent with the value in another field, and we can also make sure that the value is that field is filled out if that value is required. For example, here, date allocated is must be a date that's greater than January 1st, 1900. And then the text, if somebody enters a invalid date, would pop up with valid value must be greater than 1/1/1900. Using data validation in tables, okay, you can enter your own validation rules, and you can enter them in what are called expressions. These are a little bit like programming. Let me show you an example here. Now, in an expression, you use values like less than, greater than. This less than, greater than means not equal to, greater than or equals, or, for example, male or female. Um, and means multiple values have to be true, and so on. To create a validation rule, we've got a little exercise for that. So let's give it a try. So we'll click in the validation rule property box in field properties. So validation rule. Oh, see, I clicked the wrong place. And I got to make sure I type it correctly. If I type like, pound, 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 and press enter, that's not correct because I don't have the double quotation marks around there. So I have to do it exactly like it specifies. I fix that, I press enter, and it lets me move on. Okay, so the validation rule is it has to have 5 characters in there. Record validation makes sure the record exists elsewhere in the table. And notice when we're referring to other fields that we wrap them in square brackets. Is null means that it's blank. XOR means one or the other is null, but not both, and so on. They're a little bit more complicated to work with, so you've got to remember to type it exactly. Otherwise, it will give you an error. It won't work. So we'll click the Table Tools Design tab. Oops, wrong design tab. I was clicking for Design View. And we'll click the Property Sheet button. And that pulls up the property sheet over here on the right. I'll click the Validation Rule box. Click the Build button, those 3 dots. So I'm going to build the expression. And notice it's typing it in for me. Okay. Notice how it has square brackets and the word and, although really and should be in all uppercase. So it's using those values, weekly rental rate, daily rental rate, monthly rental rate for each of those field values for each record to make sure it's valid. Click on OK. There we go. The test validation rules, it's important to test them to see if they work. to make sure they're written correctly. Otherwise, you may exclude data that you may not want to exclude. A lookup field. A lookup field gives you a list of values that you can choose from. And you could do it as a text box where you type in a value. That's the default. A list box displays as a drop-down list with an arrow. And a combo box lets you show it as a table or lets it be displayed in a table and in a form. We'll talk about forms later on. To create a lookup field by typing a list of values, there's two ways to do it. I'll show you the first way. We'll click the service type field. Okay. And then we'll click the lookup tab and field properties. There it is. The display control property box. All right, we see it's a text box. We want to change it to a combo box. We'll change the row source type by clicking the drop down arrow. And we'll change it to a value list. We'll choose from a list of values. And we're going to type this in exactly. Notice there's semicolons after each value. Maintenance, semicolon, repair, semicolon, inspection, and press enter. We did it correctly. Continue. And we'll click the limit to property box. I don't see it, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink my screen size down by pressing Control minus a couple times. There we go. There's limit to list. I'll click that. Click the drop down arrow. I'll say yes. We only want a value that's in that list. And now, when they use that field, they have to choose one of those three values. The other way to create a lookup field is by using a wizard. And a wizard is a guided dialogue that steps you through what you have to do to finish an activity. So we'll click on the data type property box. For category. Click the drop down arrow. We'll select lookup wizard. We'll select the radio button for I. We'll type in the values. Click next. The number of columns is set to 1. We'll click the first cell. We'll type generators and press down. And that'll type in some more automatically for me. All right, click on next. We'll limit to that list because we only want those values. Click finish, and then we're done. All right. Define an input mask. Let's say I'm entering a value like a phone number, and we all know a phone number has something that looks like, let me give you an example here. For example, my phone number is 815-408-0876. So it would be three numbers, and then four numbers. We can create an input mask so when somebody's entering a phone number, they must enter three numbers, and then four numbers. Or if we want to let them type in characters, like if I had a number that had words instead of the numbers. You know how because there's numbers on the dial there's letters on the numbers on the dial pad on the phone. I could use letters instead, and so on. For example, there's an example of a phone number. This not symbol or this exclamation mark means it can enter up to four numbers. If fewer than four are entered, it shows it right justified. That's aligned to the right. And this WN, because it's in double quote, or because starts with double quotations, means it must start with WN and have four numbers. To create an input mask, let's do that exercise. We'll select the zip code field, and we'll click on Input Mask, and we're going to build an input mask this time. So the type of input mask we're going to build is a zip code. Look at that, there's one ready made for us, 5 numbers dash 4 numbers for a zip plus 4. Click Next. Review the input mask. Yeah, that's what it would look like. So you have to have 5 numbers dash 4 numbers. And the radio button without the symbols is like this is selected. That's what we want. We'll click Finish. And we've created that mask. Changing field properties after you put records into the table. This can be a little tricky because you may have records that do not fit the new field properties, so Access might complain to you about that. It will warn you if you try to change the rules, like integrity rules, and you have values that don't fit. I believe we have an exercise for that. See, the next section is pause and practice, but let's look at the lesson. We'll exit. I'll go to lessons. Access chapter 2. And we'll scoot on over. And let's see, is it back here? It's not back there. But the warning still stands. If you try to change values, or I should say, if you try to change properties after you started entering values, beware that Access will warn you that some records may not fit those new properties.